Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Far away.
So how are you feeling?
I feel amazing. I mean, I'm very weak, but I feel amazing. But it was basically, by far, the worst month of my life.
He made the world dance with faith, sued his own record label at the peak of his fame, and once turned a public bathroom arrest into a global hit. George Michael wasn't just a pop icon, he was a walking contradiction. Bold and private, broken and brilliant, scandalized and adored. But here's something you might not know. What unusual job did George Michael once do that involved hiding behind a pillar because he was too nervous to speak? Drop your guess in the comments and we'll reveal the answer a little later in the video. Stay tuned for stories of secret letters, superstar feuds, anonymous millions, and the soft-hearted rebel behind those famous sunglasses. But to truly understand the man behind the legend, we need to go back to where it all started. Because George's early life held quiet details and pivotal moments that changed everything. The head injury that sparked a legend. North London was quiet then. Vinyl crackled from upstairs windows, kids pedaled bikes down suburban streets, and corner shops knew you by name. In the middle of it all was a boy named Georgios, born in 1963 to a Greek Cypriot father and an English mother. He grew up in Kingsbury, later moving with his family to Radlett, a shy, chubby kid with glasses and a secret dream he kept entirely to himself. Life at home was warm but traditional. His father, Jack, ran a restaurant and doubted his son's dreams, while his mother, Leslie, a former dancer, nurtured George's creative side. By 8 years old, George had already made a quiet decision. He wanted to be a musician. Inspired by finding an old gramophone in the garage, he wrote his first song at 6, though he told no one. In school, he was shy and chubby. He later called himself a fat boy in glasses. But he carried a secret fire. Music became his escape, his identity, and his rebellion. Then came a turning point. At age 8, George suffered a head injury requiring stitches. He later joked that it knocked the music into him. Whether fate or coincidence, from then on his passion for melody only intensified. In his teens, he washed dishes in his dad's restaurant and picked up odd jobs, including one unforgettable role as a DJ at the Bel Air Diner in Bushy. Too nervous to speak, he announced songs from behind a pillar with clammy hands and a trembling voice. That small, sweaty booth became his first stage, and the ironic origin of a man who would later perform for millions. Everything shifted when he met Andrew Ridgeley at Bushy Meads School. Andrew saw something in George that George barely believed himself. Their friendship didn't just change his school days, it was the spark that ignited a phenomenon. Still, schoolyard dreams and garage gramophones were just the beginning. The real storm was yet to hit, and when it did, it would shake pop music to its core. The rise, the lawsuit, and the leather jacket. By the early 80s, George Michael was no longer the shy kid hiding behind a diner pillar. He was stepping onto the biggest stages in pop. Wham exploded with candy-colored confidence and irresistible hooks, but it was George's voice, songwriting, and simmering depth that quietly powered the duo's rise. Behind the flashy videos and cheeky charm, he was already aching to say more, be more. When Faith dropped in 1987, it catapulted him from pop heartthrob to global icon. The leather jacket, the stubble, the swagger, it all screamed confidence. But inside, George was already struggling. The spotlight thrilled and suffocated him in equal measure. "I was miserable," he later confessed, "and I don't want to feel that way again." The chart-topping machine he built was starting to feel like a trap. So, in a move no one saw coming, George removed himself from his own image. For Listen Without Prejudice, Volume 1, 1990, he refused to appear in music videos or even on the album cover. It wasn't rebellion for its own sake, it was about reclaiming his voice, his soul, from an industry that prized marketability over meaning. The label balked, promotion stalled. George responded by launching the cover-to-cover tour, singing Stevie Wonder and Elton John instead of pushing his own hits. Fans loved it. Sony didn't. What followed was one of pop's most dramatic legal feuds. In 1992, George sued Sony, calling himself a professional slave. He lost, but the fight made waves and cemented his legacy as an artist who put integrity above convenience. Yet even when controversy struck, George found his way to grace. After a public restroom arrest in 1998 forced him out of the closet, he turned the scandal into a cheeky anthem, outside, complete with disco balls and cop uniforms. He laughed, danced, and proved no tabloid could define him. Nonetheless, what happened offstage, the quiet rituals, the secret gestures, the hidden joys, revealed an entirely different George than the world thought it knew. The dog dad behind the shades. Away from the flashbulbs and fight for artistic freedom, George Michael melted into something far softer. He was a devoted dog dad, referring to his beloved Labradors, Meggie and Abby, as "my girls." A behind-the-scenes moment captured in a 1999 documentary showed George visiting a rescue shelter and instantly falling for a scruffy little Shih Tzu puppy, showering it with kisses like a man who'd found peace in the simplest kind of love. It was a glimpse of the real George, affectionate, grounded, and joyfully uncool. These weren't PR stunts. In private, George's love for animals was as consistent as his musical talent. For all the bravado of faith, his real faith seemed to lie in everyday tenderness, especially the kind that didn't need applause. Privacy, parties, and midnight lyrics. George's relationship with fame was always complicated. As mentioned earlier, he craved solitude as much as he craved connection. While the public saw glossy interviews and stadium lights, he found comfort in quiet rituals. He loved cooking for friends, Mediterranean comfort food, always close to his Greek Cypriot roots, and would often retreat to his country home in Goring-on-Thames just to breathe. His songwriting often happened late at night when the world was silent. These midnight sessions weren't just creative, they were sacred. It's no surprise that some of his most emotional songs carry a kind of nocturnal intimacy. George didn't need the world's attention to create magic. He just needed stillness. Laughter in the dark. George's self-deprecating wit. When life threw him public humiliation, George threw back a punchline. After his 1998 arrest in Beverly Hills, yes, that moment, he released Outside, a campy, unapologetic disco track that mocked the whole situation with sirens, uniforms, and mirror balls. He even joked the worst part wasn't being caught, but being caught with my shirt off and I was fat. That cheeky humor wasn't a one-off. In 2007, he made a brilliantly self-mocking cameo on Extras, slouched on a park bench with a kebab, playing a version of himself who cruised Hampstead Heath for flings. In another sketch with James Corden, he poked fun at his drug busts. George knew the value of not taking himself too seriously, even when the tabloids did. The Secret Giver. Behind the sarcasm and stardom was a man who quietly transformed lives. George Michael didn't just donate, he donated in silence. He gave all the royalties from Jesus to a Child to the Children's Helpline charity. Childline, a song written for Anselmo Falepa, his first love, as we'll explore in more depth later. He also handed over the entire profit from Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me to HIV, AIDS, and children's charities. Millions changed hands, but no headlines shouted it at the time. That wasn't all. George once tipped a student nurse £5,000 to help pay off her debts. Another time he overheard a woman on Deal or No Deal discussing her need for IVF treatment, and he anonymously sent her £15,000. He even volunteered anonymously at a homeless shelter each Christmas, washing dishes, serving meals, asking co-workers not to tell the guests who he was. These weren't PR moves. They were deeply personal acts of compassion from a man who knew what it meant to suffer privately. The man, not the myth. What's striking about George's lifestyle isn't the wealth, it's what he did without flaunting it. He didn't care about yachts or red carpets. His favorite moments were meals with friends, cuddling his dogs, or surprising strangers with acts of kindness. The same man who sued a label and sold out tours would go home and quietly cook dinner or write lyrics alone in his garden. He lived with contradictions, pop god and private soul, jokester and mourner, recluse and rebel, and somehow all those sides made perfect sense together. Yet beneath the laughs and late-night cooking sessions was a man whose deepest stories were written in the relationships he built and the ones he lost. The third wheel who built a family. From whirlwind romances to lifelong friendships, George Michael's relationships were rich with emotion, complexity, and moments that shaped his soul and his songs. Anselmo Falepa was his first great love, a Brazilian designer he met in 1991. Their relationship was brief, but seismic. When Anselmo died of an AIDS-related illness just 2 years later, George was devastated. As mentioned earlier, the grief inspired Jesus to a child, a haunting tribute, and privately it became the moment he came out to his parents. Not in person, but through a heartfelt letter written the day after Anselmo's death. His parents responded not with shock, but with love. They were more concerned about his loss than the revelation. It was bittersweet. Grief led to honesty, and honesty led to healing. Later came Kenny Goss, a partner for over a decade. Their relationship was joyful at times and strained at others, marred by addiction struggles and emotional distance. Still, George often said Kenny brought him both joy and pain, a reflection of just how deep their bond ran. And in his final years, he was with Fadi Fawaz, whose presence at the time of George's death sparked posthumous tensions with the family. But not all his relationships were romantic. His friendships revealed just as much heart. When Geri Halliwell left the Spice Girls in 1998, it was George who whisked her away to Saint-Tropez to hide from the chaos. What was supposed to be a weekend turned into a healing summer. Then there's the story of Shirley Holliman. George literally chaperoned her first date with Martin Kemp. That third wheel moment ended in marriage, and George became godfather to their children. Yet it wasn't just those close to him who felt his impact. How he used his fortune said just as much about his heart as who he gave it to. The fortune that still sings. George Michael's net worth at the time of his passing in 2016 was estimated at $200 million. His wealth stemmed from a prolific music career, including over 120 million records sold worldwide, with his debut solo album, Faith, selling more than 25 million copies alone. His estate continues to generate substantial income, with reports indicating that his company, Nobby's Hobbies Holding Limited, earned over £30 million in the past 2 years. Notably, £3.5 million came from royalties of Last Christmas, which topped the UK charts in 2023, and £91,559 was earned from a Netflix documentary celebrating Wham's 40th anniversary. Despite this financial success, there have been concerns regarding the management of his estate. After his death, George left his £97.6 million fortune primarily to his sisters, Iota and Melanie Panayo II. However, following Melanie's death in 2019, questions arose about the whereabouts of a significant portion of the inheritance, as her will reportedly accounted for only £6.2 million. Yet beyond the numbers, the true essence of George Michael's legacy is reflected in how he chose to live and give. The homes that held his soul. From quiet cottages to opulent London mansions, George Michael's real estate choices were less about flash and more about refuge. His most personal property was Mill Cottage in Goring-on-Thames, a 16th-century riverside retreat where he spent weekends and Christmases, often with close friends or quietly alone. This was where George died on Christmas Day, 2016, a deeply symbolic ending in the very place he called his sanctuary. The pool house, which he proudly showed Oprah in 2004, is now listed on Airbnb, offering fans a chance to literally step into his world. Then there was his London base, 5 The Grove in Highgate. Bought in 2002 for £7.65 million, the Grade 2 listed townhouse reflected old-world charm and privacy behind high brick walls. After his passing, the estate fell into disrepair, but his sister Iota later oversaw controversial renovations, sparking neighborhood outcry over heritage trees and proposed security upgrades. For locals, it marked a poignant shift from the George they knew, the man who once funded the local Christmas fair and volunteered anonymously in shelters, to something more distant and guarded. Across the Atlantic, his California escape in Santa Barbara was pure architectural indulgence, 5.7 acres of cliffside serenity, complete with wraparound terraces and a Frank Lloyd Wright-inspired design. It served as a creative haven during the making of Listen Without Prejudice and Older, offering seclusion when fame became too much. Still, George's relationship with his homes reflected more than taste. They mirrored his journey from pop star to private soul, from spectacle to sanctuary. Each wall held a story, and each retreat gave him space to be himself. Yet for all his stillness at home, when it came to his choice of vehicles, George's style shifted gears, often with flair, sometimes with fallout. The cars, crashes, and campy cool. George Michael's vehicles were an extension of his personality, elegant, a little rebellious, and never without a story. He had a soft spot for luxury cars, starting with his beloved Mercedes SL-R 107 in 1985. He loved it so much he bought multiple versions over the years and even gifted one to Jerry Halliwell. His collection also included a Ferrari 599 GTB Fiorano and a Bentley Continental GT, proof that he appreciated both speed and style. Despite the flash, George often chose to be chauffeured in a BMW 7 Series, a quiet nod to his preference for comfort over spectacle in later years. Then there was the Range Rover HSE, registered under his birth name, part of a life lived half in public, half in shadow. He also flirted with biker culture, famously donning a BSA leather jacket in the Faith video. Though it's unclear if he owned one, the image stuck. George as the cool, confident rocker, leaning on a Triumph Bonneville-style Mystique. It was more about the vibe than the vehicle, classic, raw, and deeply British. When touring the globe, George traveled in style. Private jets carried him between continents, especially during his massive 25 live tour. There were also sightings of him enjoying yacht excursions, though he never flaunted ownership. These rare glimpses of him at sea were more about peace than prestige. Then came the more dramatic side of his vehicle history, like the infamous 2013 M1 motorway incident, where George fell out of a moving Range Rover and had to be airlifted to hospital by helicopter. It was surreal, serious, and very George. A brush with disaster wrapped in mystery and media frenzy. He recovered, of course, both physically and with his usual humor, emotionally too. Nevertheless, the final chapter of George's story isn't written in leather seats or roaring engines. It's in what remains today, his music, his memory, and how the world continues to honor him. The legacy still writing its chorus. Though George Michael passed away on Christmas Day 2016, his presence hasn't faded, it's evolved. In recent years, his music has experienced a powerful resurgence. Last Christmas finally hit the UK's Christmas #1 in both 2023 and 2024, nearly 4 decades after its release. His estate continues to generate millions, including £3.5 million in royalties and even profits from a Wham! Netflix documentary. Tribute tours like The Life and Music of George Michael continue to pack venues, and in 2023 he was posthumously inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, an honor long overdue. Behind the scenes, however, the management of his estate has stirred quiet drama, with questions around missing fortunes and disputed inheritances echoing in the press. Still, his true legacy isn't in charts or controversies, it's in the quiet generosity, self-deprecating humor, and deeply personal artistry he left behind. George Michael wasn't just a pop legend. He was a soul who turned tragedy into truth, shame into satire, and silence into song. And long after the headlines fade, his voice, and what he stood for, keeps echoing. From behind a pillar to the top of the charts, George Michael's story was anything but ordinary. What surprised you most about his life? Drop it in the comments. Hit like if you love the journey and subscribe for more stories like this. And if you want more, check out one of our other deep dives on screen now.